Hey there, everybody. Welcome to Everyone Else Has a Podcast. We're so glad that you could join us here. This is our very first episode, very first one. My name is JD Swilly. I've been married to my wife for 20 years, and I have three amazing children, two teenagers and one that's a tween. And I also pastor a local church just outside Nashville, Tennessee. That's who I am. And then here with me is my cohort, Scott. So Scott, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey there. I'm Scott Asher, and I also am married, and I've got four children. I work in communications at a really big corporation, and I'm glad to have a job right now, frankly. So I'm just excited to be here talking to my friend. Why not? Everyone else has a podcast, so.
Everyone else has a podcast. Yeah, so Scott, tell us how we came across this name.
Well, I think it was because Joe Biden was starting a podcast, which is hilarious. And because literally everybody has a podcast at this point. If Joe Biden's going to make a podcast, and I haven't seen anything of it, but someone made a joke on Twitter about it, and they're like, everyone has a podcast. And I was like, this is a good name, because JD and I have spent so many, we spent hours trying to figure out a name for a podcast. And, frankly, at this point, we're so late to the game. All the good names are taken. So,
True.
So what are we going to do? And then someone made a sarcastic comment, and I was like, this is perfect, because we're sarcastic, and why not us?
Yeah, why not us? Yeah, and it is interesting, and I'll say this, like, you and I have had some really great conversations since we've known each other for coming up on 3 years now. But within the last year, I probably have said many times, why are we not recording this conversation? Because this would make a great podcast. And so finally, I said that enough times that we decided to make a podcast. And so maybe you're going to be entertained by our conversations. Maybe you're not. We don't really care. We're doing this really for our own amusement.
Maybe we used up all the good conversations already that should have been a podcast, and now we're left with nothing else. So
it's possible.
We'll see if people are intrigued or entertained, or if they just make fun of us. And if that's what they tune into to make fun of us, then then that's fine. It's all really about how do we monetize this. So mistake number one, I forgot to hit record on the video.
Okay, so we're doing audio. So now no one can make us a meme, is what you're saying?
Right. Should we go back and start, or should we just keep this audio?
Or start from this point.
I'll start from this point. There we go. That's funny. So Scott, what are we going to talk about in this podcast? Not just this particular episode, but in general, what is this podcast about?
Whatever we want to.
True.
That's what I want to talk about. Whatever we want to. I know you said that you're a pastor. Also, I'm a Christian as well, but we don't have to talk about Christian stuff, although I think probably Christian stuff's going to come up a lot.
I think so.
Because it informs our worldview, but it's not primarily that. We talk about all kinds of topics, and I thought that would be fun. Talk about whatever we want to talk about.
Yeah, and for the longest time, we did consider this being strictly a podcast that's connected to our church or a Christian-based podcast. But we decided that we didn't want to be restricted to just talking about theological things, although that will automatically come up because that's just kind of who we are. But we also wanted to talk about things like, hey, I saw the movie 1917. Let's talk about that. Or whatever, fill in the blank. Yeah, it is. It's a great movie. So that's what this is about. It's about whatever comes to our minds that we think that other people might want to know what we have to say. Yes, we're that important that people would want to know.
When I was a kid, my dad would take us to school early, and we'd sit in the parking lot. And I might be misremembering this exactly, but we were in California, Los Angeles, and it was Rick Dees in the morning. And Rick Dees got popular for a while, but so we're talking about the 80s, okay? So Rick Dees in the morning, and I swear he said something like he had this running gag about how his 7 listeners or something. and he'd be like telling stuff, and they'd be like, and that's for our 7 listeners out there. Well, if we count our moms and our wives, and then maybe a couple more friends, we might get to 7. And so I'm excited.
You think our wives are going to listen to this?
For 45 seconds.
Yeah.
They're going to listen for 45 seconds, and that's it.
Yeah, and I know
we'll have to do really small clips.
I know my kids won't. So we'll have to maybe pay people to say that they listen to it.
Right. We'll buy Twitter followers.
Yes, that's what we'll do. All from former Soviet bloc countries.
They need jobs too.
It's true.
These fake people. True. Fake followers.
So we just got through talking about and saying that we're going to talk about anything that ever comes to our mind. But the first thing that I want to talk about, because it seems to be relevant today, and I just want to say this, we are recording this podcast on Thursday, April 2nd, 2020, and it might be actually a few days before this actually hits the World Wide Webs. So if you feel like, man, these guys are way behind the times, just know that we're actually recording this on April 2nd. But the first thing I want to talk about is actually how pastors are getting arrested around the country for continuing to hold church services during the quarantine. So today's Thursday. This past Monday, we saw in the news Pastor Rodney Howard-Browne, who pastors the church, the River Church in Tampa, Florida. And he's a pretty prominent guy in some circles, in charismatic circles especially. He's well known. And he had a church service, his mega church, and the Tampa police came and got him and arrested him. And it kind of, it's heartbreaking on a lot of different levels to me. And I know there's a lot of different opinions out there, but I don't care about your opinion. I just care about my opinion.
Great. That's exactly what they're going to say.
That's what Jesus said, right? I don't care about your opinion. I just care about mine. First hesitations.
First hesitations, is that what you said?
Yeah, first hesitations, yeah. Scott, what do you think about this?
Well, yeah, and I talked to you about this ahead of time. I'm pretty passionate about this, to be honest with you. I mean, the churches that are doing it, I get why they're doing it, and we can talk about why some of the reasons are that they're doing this, still meeting. But when I look at places like South Korea, where most of the outbreaks were traced to a couple of religious places. I'm not sure if they're Christian churches or if they're cults, but a couple of religious services where the majority of the people that ended up getting infected started there, or large clusters did. Or you hear about the Indians and the North American Indians in Albuquerque, and in New Mexico, the governor was saying that there was a huge outbreak, and that was traced to a religious meeting. And you look at that and you think, okay, I get that we want to lay hands on people and pray for the sick. I get that we want to build people up. We want to spend time with them. And a lot of us are struggling with, being alone or being stuck in a house. Some states you're kind of stuck. You're not even supposed to go anywhere really. I get that, but at a certain point, you have to realize what you're doing here is you're imperiling the safety of your people, the people that you love. And I feel like that there are ways to do what they need to do. Like Ronnie Howard-Browne was saying that he wants to lay hands on people. I'm like, yes, you should lay hands on people when they're sick. Is there a way to do that without having a service with 500 people or 1,000 people or whatever? And I think that there is. I think that there are ways to do that. Either if you feel really strongly about it, you can put on masks and gloves and you can go to their house and pray for the sick people. And then you're only doing one person at a time. I'm not someone, I'm kind of like the Pope. I believe that if there are no priests available, you can go directly to Jesus, which looks like we were right all along. Protestants, way to go. Yeah,
That's
he said that.
Almost heretical.
Right, but we could probably ask for prayer over the phone and it would be okay. We can pray, in email. We can pray on Zoom like this. We don't have to do this. And so I don't think this is necessarily a question of legality or whether they should have the right to meet. It's not a First Amendment issue. It's more an issue of wisdom. If it kills, this kills, 1 out of 1,000 people. And older people is higher than that. And Rodney Howard Brown's church is over 1,000 people. Which of those people is he willing to put at peril? Because he's going to lose one or more of them, right?
Yeah.
Just by meeting. And I don't think it's worth it. I think you can pray for him in different ways. So I'm not excited about this. I'm not excited about giving that opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. When you were talking just now, and you were talking about let's come up with some inventive ways to pray for the sick, it made me think of Acts chapter 19, when Paul laid hands on cloth or handkerchiefs or aprons, and then those things, he prayed for those things, and that was it was a touch point of faith. And then the people would take those and take them to the sick people. And here's what it says, Acts 19:11. It says, "And God was doing extraordinary miracles by the hands of Paul, so that even handkerchiefs or aprons that had touched his skin were carried away to the sick, and their diseases left them, and the evil spirits came out of them." I think that's pretty inventive. I think that's pretty remarkable, and and they didn't even have Zoom back then.
Right.
And so, man, I think it's kind of a little bit of, this is my opinion. I'm not trying to make a judgment, but it seems to me that it could be a little bit of pride. It could be a little bit of arrogance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it could be a little bit of foolishness. There could be some very sincere people that are saying, you know what, we should meet because we shouldn't be afraid of the sickness and disease, because the power of God, courses through our bodies and our veins. And so we're people of faith, and we're going to do this. I'm sure there are very sincere people that are doing that, but it doesn't seem to me like that's real faith. That seems to me like you're stepping over into the area of foolishness. And also you're stepping over into the area of lawlessness, depending on what county or what state you live in. And that's an important thing for me, is that the church would be a good example to the rest of the world on how to proceed during these times of crisis. And this whole thing of COVID-19 and everyone being on lockdown and quarantine, I don't believe it has anything to do with the persecution of the gospel. It doesn't seem that way in any way, shape, or form to me. So this is not a time for us to be lawless. I think it's a time for us to be lawful. And I think that, again, like I said, it's time for the church to be a good example to our communities. Hey, here's how we're going to proceed. We're not going to walk in foolishness. We're going to abide by the decrees that our government is giving us. And we're not going to walk in fear. We're not going to... listen, I think it's great that you want to lay hands on people. Obviously, you're not walking in fear if you're doing that. And so we don't need to step into fear, but let's walk the path of wisdom and real faith and peace, and bring, let's be thermostats to our community. And instead of making people crazy or joining in with the fear or joining in with the chaos, which is what it feels like to me of these churches that saying they're going to continue to meet, that seems chaotic to me. And it seems like it's actually going to drum up more fear in people, to be honest, to me. That's not what the church is called to do during this point, in my opinion. So let's be inventive. Let's lay hands on prayer cloths, or whatever it is the Holy Spirit leads us to do. Now, I think it's amusing. Again, like I said, we're not going to make this podcast all about Christian stuff or church stuff, and this is the very first topic that we're talking about. But I think it's very relevant.
Yeah, I mean, it's relevant. When you talk about fearlessness, there's a difference between being consumed by fear and it's holding you back from doing something you're supposed to, and being so fearless that you're willing to pick up a knife and, slice your hand. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, that's not fearless. Look, I'm not afraid of this cut. Stupid. That's stupid. And this isn't fearlessness. Like you said, if it was persecution or something like that, it's got to be one of those hills that you're willing to die on kind of things for a Christian to say, I'm going to stop following the rules here. If you say, you can't preach the gospel. Okay, yeah, you know what? God's law is higher than man's law. I'm going to keep preaching the gospel, right? But if this is the hill that you're willing to die on, it's like, just please don't meet for a little while. And this is the one where I'm going to get up in arms fight. It's like you're looking for an argument. You're looking for a fight. And you already see a section of the media and a section of the world out there saying, see, look at the Christians. They're the ones spreading this. See, look at the Christians. They're the ones acting foolish. And I don't think it's giving us a good reputation for people to be afraid. What's that question going to be if someone gets sick at that church? They're going to go there, and some of the questionnaires are going to be like, who did you come in contact with over the last 10 days? Well, I came in contact with 500 people at my church. Well, now all 500 of those people have to be notified, and all 500 of those people have to be quarantined, and you're just like, this is dumb. You've just taxed our system when it should be working for people that are sick and can't avoid being sick, and you've just given our enemy an opportunity to look bad at us, look down on us, and to be a bad representation of Christianity. I mean, if I can't even keep people safe from a sickness that I may have, that's not outreach. That's not the right kind of spreading the good news. Right. That's not spreading the good news. That's spreading the bad news. That's spreading the COVID news, So I think people should just stay home. But one of the things that I think is driving this for some people is that they don't know how to do church online. They're not savvy, and they don't know, they don't know what to do. They don't know how to use Zoom. They don't know how to use, all of the different ones that are for online meetings or Facebook Live or YouTube or whatever. And maybe they only got one person at the church who knows how to do it, and they're not on staff or something like that. And so you've got this kind of generational thing, because I have noticed that, I'm not saying this is the reason, but I have noticed that the pastors that are getting visited by the cops, the guy in Baltimore or the two that got cited or arrested, they are all older. And I don't know if that plays a part in it. Maybe they feel like if they don't have the meetings, their churchgoers are going to be left out. I don't know what the reasons are, but that seems like that's operating in fear. The church is going to be the church. And when this is all over in a few months, the people that want to go to church are going to go to church. And the people who don't want to go to church won't. The people who want to give will. The people that won't go. It's fine. Right. God is in control of this, and it's going to work out the way that it's supposed to work out. We don't need to try to act out and try to make things happen for ourselves. But if there are people that know how to do this kind of stuff, I would very much like them to step up. Someone at Rodney Howard Brown's church, or the guy in Baltimore, or the other one, I forget his name right now, help them. Show them that this can be done online.
Absolutely.
And help them with ideas on how to do this with Instagram and Facebook and all of the different ways that we have now. Because this is the first time you've got a quarantine in the history of the world where we're not actually apart. Yes, I can't hug right now. I can't lay my hands on you. I can, put it on the camera. But we're not actually apart, which is amazing. And church,
it is amazing.
We should be using that, not afraid of it.
One of the things I saw a couple of weeks ago, Pastor Chris Hodges at Church of the Highlands in Birmingham. Pastors, if you don't have a way to record your sermon to broadcast it this weekend, come to one of our campuses on this day, between this hour and this hour, or I don't remember what the system was that they set up. They might have to call ahead and schedule a time. But we will record your message so that you can get it out there on the internet to your congregation. And I just thought that was phenomenal. I thought that was just so generous. I thought that was the body of Christ working hand in hand together and not being territorial. And I actually watched the Church of the Highlands service from not this past Sunday, but from 2 Sundays ago. I got on later in the week and I watched it. And again, Pastor Chris addressed an entire congregation in Birmingham that he knew was watching his live stream that day. And he was just, hey, I know if you're from, I don't remember the name of the church, but hey, if you're from Faith Church and you're watching today, we're so glad to have you here. We know that your pastor couldn't, he couldn't be with you today. He couldn't communicate with you today. I think that pastor was sick or something like that. So I know that he told all of you in his congregation to watch Church of the Highlands today. We're so glad that you've joined us. And then when it came to the offering time for him to receive tithes and offerings, he told that other congregation, he says, hey, if you're watching right now and you're not part of Church of the Highlands, but you're part of another local church, continue to be faithful in your generosity and your giving to your own local church right now. They need it more now than ever. And I just thought that was such a great example of helping people that need help, helping the body of Christ. And you were talking about all this, and I think one of the things for us is to realize that we need to first accept the loss. In this whole pandemic, there have been major losses. And some of these losses will be regained when everything goes back to normal. But the world will never know the same normal that we knew 2 months ago. It won't. It doesn't matter if everything opens back up again, and if Starbucks is open again and you don't have to, just go through the drive-through between 6 a.m. and 2 p.m. If you actually get to walk in the store and order your caramel macchiato, whatever it is, the world is still going to be different in some ways than it was 2 months ago. And so I think, number one, just accept the losses. Like, it is what it is. I don't have the power to change that. I'm going to grieve the loss. And now I need to adjust to the new normal. I need to figure out, how does the world work now? And I need to adapt and be flexible. I think if we could add to Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5, I think Jesus would say, blessed are the flexible, for they won't be broken. Some people, I think, probably think, man, I just can't do it. I can't adjust. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. I just don't buy into that philosophy. Man, I think the world would be in a really bad place if strong leaders just took that stance, if people just gave up so easily. And I think about even people like in everyday life, normal people. My grandfather is approaching 90 years old. And this guy has worked his entire life until he retired not that long ago, really. He retired as a diesel mechanic. So you got this guy who straight out of high school went to diesel mechanic school, then came out and worked as a diesel mechanic, worked for a few companies, and then started his own company, and he ran that for years and years. And that's all he knew. And so he retires, and now he starts learning new things. He starts learning how to trade stocks. He starts learning how to, run a computer and operate on Facebook and all kinds of things. The guy's flexible. And he's not a world leader or anything like that. He's just a normal guy that lives an everyday life. But yet he has not given up. He's not rolling over and just saying, all right, well, this is it. This is the end. As a matter of fact, just last week he had surgery on his leg. And he's loving life, man. He's going for it. So I'm thankful for people like that being good examples to us to say, hey, be flexible, learn new things. It doesn't matter. It hurts. Accept the losses, grieve the loss. Now adjust to the new normal.
One of the cool things that might not go back to normal after this is the for instance. In my white collar job, my day job, most of the workers were sent home to work, which was not the way that they were set up to do it. And so now what we're doing is we're celebrating the fact that on our conference calls we're being interrupted by our kids, and our dogs and our cats and the family is climbing on them. And so you have this humanizing going on where you can see bosses and corporate bigwigs and CEOs and things like that, and they're sitting on a conference call with a kid on their lap, and you're like, oh, you're a real person too. And and you don't really see that a lot, and there's this almost built-in grace that's there for everyone to say, we're all regular people. Because in the world and in the church, both of them, you have this face that you put on when you're at work, and you've got the like work Scott and you've got the home Scott. And this situation is causing the separation between those two things to really kind of break down for a lot of people. And I find that interesting, and I would like it to not go back. I would like people to just be people, and and if that means that we're going to have a better work-life balance, or more human leaders, where you can really get to know each other and say, I don't really understand, what they do in their job, but I understand who they are as a person, and so I got some grace for you. And if we could break down some of those silos in the corporate world, but we can also do it with the church, like what you were saying, where churches can start to work with each other better. I've gone to churches where we didn't do anything with other churches, even though there was one across the street. We never did anything with them. And I'm like, why didn't we do something with them? Was it because they were a different denomination? And because our same denomination was right down the road, we still didn't do anything. And it's kind of like we almost got our own little silo, and we just got to stay in our silo, and we don't trust other people. But like the pastor you were talking about, the hero there, in my opinion, is also the pastor of the other church that couldn't do it, and said, I'm going to trust you with my sheep, so to speak, as a shepherd. I'm going to trust you with my sheep. I'm not going to be so prideful that I'm going to settle for a second-rate option. I'm going to go with a proven leader that's nearby that can help with my people for a week or two. And why can't that be done? Why can't we do more stuff with each other? Remember I sent you, I don't know if you saw it, but I sent you a handout. There was a couple of churches that had these handouts for visitors, and they put them in the pews or in the seats.
Right.
And it said, if this isn't your cup of tea, here's some other local churches that are good churches to try. And that's fearlessness. That's saying God's in control. You may not like necessarily the songs we sang, or how casual we are, or how, or vice versa, because some people are like, I want a more solemn service. I want one where there's more hymns than current songs, whatever the situation. But here's some other churches that might fit you, and we should be fearless in that way, saying, I'm a partner with you, and we're on the same team here, because our view isn't on what happens in my building with my people, that my view is on what's happening in the kingdom, and I'm just one of the players on this team. Like, I'm not the team. I'm one player on this team, and I'd really like to see more. I'd like to see it in the corporate world more. Come out of our silos, work together with each other, especially in times of crisis like this. But I definitely would like to see it within the church more. We should all be on the same team. I don't know exactly how that works. I know ARC does a good job of keeping people together, and Radiant does. Yeah. But some of the other churches don't. Some of the other organizations don't. And there's so many non-denominationals that are kind of on their own island. And you're like, well, wouldn't it be great if we all worked together? No. And not divide. But
absolutely. I think you make up a great point that the hero is not just Chris Hodges, but the hero is also the guy that's willing to say, I need help. That's good. Not moving on from this just yet, I just heard last night, I was scrolling through Facebook, and a friend of mine in Pennsylvania posted an article from the New York Post. And I'm going to pull that up here for a second. Here's the headline. Pastor plans Woodstock-like Easter gathering to protest coronavirus stay-at-home orders. And so, sure enough, there's this guy, evangelist Jonathan Shuttlesworth, said he's going to hold an outdoor Easter blowout service, even though Florida pastor Rodney Howard-Browne was arrested Monday for holding services the day before, potentially placing attendees at risk for COVID-19. And this is what he says. He says, I'm going to announce it. We're going to hold an outdoor Easter blowout service, not online, a national gathering. You can come from all over like Woodstock, and we're going to gather and lift up Jesus Christ. And I'm not going to read the entire article, but this just seems absolutely foolish and arrogant to me. And I just thought of another thing that I read from one of my pastors, Dan Scott. He wrote this yesterday. He says, earlier today, I responded to a post that defended churches meeting during this time of quarantine. Here is my response. Dear friends, we now have a clear record of viral infections spreading through church gatherings. One choir rehearsal spread it to 30 members. 2 of them have died now. The choir members were careful. They refrained from hugs. They washed their hands when entering. All of that. Choir members sing with force, thus expelling droplets, some of which contain viruses that are then breathed in by others. We also do that when we pray corporately. One Pentecostal revival meeting near Chicago has experienced something similar. The evangelist is now in ICU and he's not doing well. If we unnecessarily endanger our nation's health after hearing government officials from both parties and at local, state, and federal government levels warn us, plead with us not to gather, we will have very little witness left with the people we wish to serve and reach when all of this is over. If any of us is immune, if any of us were immune suppressed, say from chemotherapy or a recent operation, and our doctor asked us to stay home for 3 weeks, we would do it. That is the case here. We're not losing our liberties. We're just not accustomed to submitting ourselves to anyone for anything. We preach it to the congregants, but most pastors aren't very good about it ourselves. Let's just do what our government has asked us to do. It's not unreasonable. It's not for long. And it's the charitable and righteous thing to do. Since I wrote this, I learned that numbers of infections occurred in Kentucky during a revival meeting. The congregants were sincere and good people, but that's not the issue. Uninformed sincerity can kill. Let's be wise, charitable, and prudent during this crisis. When it's over, we will have ample opportunity to gather and rejoice to our heart's content.
Yes.
I thought that was very well said.
Well, he's a smart guy.
He is a smart guy.
And those are just more of the same stories where I think you hit on all the key points. What's it doing to our witness? You're killing your friends, possibly, right? And when I was thinking about the choir practice, I'm like, what are we doing when we're singing? When we're worshiping, we're doing the same expelling. So we're, getting the people in front of us sick or something like that. And it's just, what's the point of this? We're at the point in the United States where the people going and getting tested and turning up positive is like 25,000 a day. And so you look at that and you just say, and it's been like that. 10 days ago, we didn't even have 25,000, if I remember correctly. I think it was 2 weeks ago Friday, 2 weeks ago tomorrow, we got to 2,000, I think it was. And so you're talking something like that, or 20,000. One of those weeks was 2,000, one of them was 20,000. So we're talking about more, and this is just rolling and rolling and rolling. And this guy, Shuttlesworth, that's one of those questions again, is this really the hill? You're like, I'm going to protest the government. This is like Christians somehow coming together and protesting California not using plastic straws. Why? Is this a Christian issue? Is this an issue of Christ? Is this an issue of salvation? This is not. This is not an issue of any of those things. So why are we majoring on the minors here? I mean, it's not even a minor. This isn't even a small disagreement between Christians. This is a non-existent, this is not in the Bible at all. There's nothing that says you have to meet during a time of a pandemic. What did all these sailors do? You're a Christian sailor on a boat with 3 other dudes, and they're not Christians. How did you go to church? What happened then? There's all these examples of, missionaries going to another country being by themselves, and it was still okay. It seems very pharisaical, like, oh, you're going to eat on the Sabbath kind of nonsense, and or heal people on the Sabbath. And you're like, well, look, these things were made for us, not for us for them. Going to church was made for us, not us for the church. And so I don't get Shuttleworth. I don't get the Woodstock thing. I really hope it doesn't happen. And I really hope people don't go there. But I feel like that there is a portion of the United States who feels like that this is some kind of spiritual battle or political battle, and they have to fight this battle. And I just feel like that we're really wasting our time on this. We're wasting our capital on this. So I really hope they don't, and I really, really hope that we don't end up having a big outbreak from it when they do meet together, because that would be terrible. Absolutely terrible.
Yeah. We're taking up a lot of time on this issue, but it's a pretty big one. Before we move on, and maybe we won't even get to the fun stuff in this episode. I don't know, because we're already several minutes in. But I want to say this. That's true, because everyone else has a podcast, so we ought to. And this is ours. We don't answer anybody except our corporate sponsors, who
we don't have
any yet.
We're not ruled by any overlords.
It's true.
Just Jesus. Sorry. You're like, now I don't even know what I was going to say.
I don't, because I didn't write it down. No, I do remember. So this has come up in conversation. I don't know if you and I have talked about this previously, but I had a lengthy conversation with someone about it today, earlier, and this might have been the second time I've had the conversation last week. But there's this whole, like, in theological circles, the big question of, is this God's punishment on people? Is this God's punishment on the world? And so some people are in that camp. There's people in the other camp that are like, no, all of God's wrath was poured out on Jesus at the cross. And you know what? I don't care. I don't care about either one of those questions, because, and I do have an opinion. I do have a spiritual, theological opinion on that. But it doesn't matter which side of the fence you sit on. We don't have to wax theologically. We don't have to wax philosophically about that question. Is this God's judgment on the earth? Or, is this an attack of the enemy? Or, do we just live in a fallen earth and this kind of stuff happens? The response for the church is the same, regardless of the answer to that question. The response of the church is, we pray. If we need to repent, we repent. We pray that God would intervene. We pray that God would work through his church on the earth today. We trust in God. We walk in faith. It doesn't matter the answer to that question. The response is the exact same. And so I don't think we need to spend a lot of time mulling over that. I think we just need to get on our knees, and we need to love our neighbors, and we need to walk in wisdom.
Yeah, the only thing I would say about that is I would be real careful about speaking for God. And a lot of people just have no problem doing it. And I'm not real sure why there's this freedom to speak for God when we don't actually have sincere assuredness, I guess is the right way to say it. When I look at that, the commandment, about using the Lord's name in vain, I think speaking for God when he didn't speak is using his name in vain. If I say, absolutely, thus saith the Lord, this is a judgment from God. I'm not talking about this situation. I'm talking about any of these situations, because it comes up all the time, especially on TV. The people on TV will always be speaking for God. And I'm just like, man, you better be careful about that. Because I'm
on TV now.
You're on TV.
Every pastor is a televangelist now.
Great. Okay. I'm talking about the ones who are asking for your money. And anyway, so that'll be a different topic. But okay, but you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah,
every time
totally.
something happens, there's a hurricane, that must be, someone's done something wrong, and it's a judgment for sin. And, I think you just need to be really careful about saying this is God's judgment, because the Bible didn't say that everything that happens to people is a judgment from God. And so, and in fact, remember Jesus said, they asked him who sinned for this person to be born with the disability. He's like, nobody sinned.
Right.
And so there's this like rush to judgment, I think, and that's the kind of judgmentalism that I think we need to be really careful about. It's like, you've done something wrong, this is God deciding that you deserve something. And that kind of thing is like, wait a second, are you telling me that potentially millions of people all around the world from all different backgrounds, including God-fearing Christian people, are all under judgment because of sin in one country? Like, is that really, that for sure? And I want to say be really careful about that. And I think that the three options that you gave, where it could be judgment, it could be Satan, it could also be that we live in a fallen world. I think that happens a lot. And a lot of the things that happen on this planet, they fall into all of those categories. And I think we shouldn't be speaking for God on this topic. I don't think anybody knows why exactly COVID is happening to the point where they can say this is definitely one of those three. All we can say is it's happening. I like that you said we can pray, but I also think we need to use wisdom when we're talking, the kinds of things we're saying. And that's stupid because I'm sure we're going to say some dumb things on this podcast at some point. And
We probably already did.
but don't speak for God. That's what I want to say. Stop it. You sound, and I'm not saying you, JD, I'm not saying anybody in particular, but there are people out there who just sound dumb. They sound ignorant. They sound hateful. They are not drawing people towards Christ. And then there'd be people who are like, well, the sins are what draws people to him. I guess it's actually the grace that covers those sins that draws people to him, to Jesus. And so I'm not sure that it's our job to go and make up new sins and make up new judgments and make up new consequences for things. I don't think that's our role. So throwing that out there.
Wow. So we are about 45 minutes or something like that into this episode. Do we want to talk about something lighthearted, or we just want to save that for the next episode?
No, we should do something because we said we're going to talk about anything we want to, not just Christian stuff. And all we did was talk about.
If anyone is still listening, let's talk about something fun.
Yeah. You have to listen to the Christian stuff to get to the candy at the end. It's like children's ministry.
Oh, Lord.
It's true. We went to one church one time. We were visiting a church with some friends, and I took my two sons, and they went to children's ministry at the time. And I asked them, how was children's ministry? And they're like, it's so great. Look what I got. And they had like a pile of candy bars, full-size candy bars. And I'm like, so that's what made church great? Yeah, that's what made church
candy
great.
Bars.
Full size, dude. They didn't skimp. Right. Absolutely. What's like three fun done while you were in quarantine or social distancing over the last couple of weeks? Like three new things or shows or movies or books.
Okay. Since you asked the question, I'll go first and then you can follow up. Okay, so one of the fun things that our family has done is we have learned to play Settlers of Catan. So I had played once before, probably a year ago, year and a half, something like that. And my wife also the same. And so we weren't really Catan masters. I don't even know if that's a term or not because we're not deep into the culture yet. But we have adapted it, and it is now a new family thing, and everybody in the family likes it. It's one of the magical things that everybody in the family can come to agreement on, and we like it. I'm praising and thanking God that my wife and I can meet and have common ground on a game that we both like, and that it's something our kids can join with us too. And our kids are old enough where they can actually start getting this stuff, and start learning strategy, and we can coach them. And so that's fun. Another thing that we did a few days ago, a week ago, however long it's been now, that all the days run together. I feel like we're on a deserted island, and for some reason I've not been making the marks on the coconut for how many days we've been on the island. But my kids turned our entire downstairs, our kitchen and our living room area, they turned it into a movie theater. So they had been planning this for like half the day. And even our two older kids went to the store and they got soda and movie candy, like in the boxes, they came home and they popped popcorn, and they sent Jamie and I upstairs while they did all this. So they came downstairs and they had these giant signs, and they made menus, and they put prices on everything, on all the candy. And then we got sent to our phones. We were sent movie tickets, just like you go to the movie theater and they scan the QR code. So Noble he photoshopped, a movie ticket and sent that to us. And it was for the movie Doolittle, the one that just came out not long ago with Robert Downey Jr. And so we went through the whole process. I tried to just walk straight into the living room, the movie theater, And Noble, who was the usher, was very quick to remind me that, sir, you can't get through there without getting your ticket scanned. And so they played the whole bit. We sat down and they played movie previews for us. And then this announcement comes on the sound system. And Noble had pre-recorded this thing about, make sure that you turn your phone off, put your phone on silent, and respect the other, moviegoers around you. It was so funny. It was hilarious. It was so great. And then we watched the movie, and I found out later that the movie had a 14% on Rotten Tomatoes. Hello, Eli.
Family.
The movie
14%?
had 14% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I completely agree with that rating. The movie is probably fantastic for kids for like 7 and under. But my family, we were pretty bored with it, but we just had fun with it. We made fun of the movie and had a great time. So that was the second thing.
Yeah.
The third thing is something we're doing tomorrow. So in my neighborhood, we have a Facebook group for everyone that's part of our neighborhood and our HOA. And we don't make you be part of the Facebook group, but you can opt in. And so I got on there last night, probably 10:30, 11 o'clock last night, and I had heard about this idea, and I just typed in, "Hey, everybody, I've been looking for new and inventive ways of just blessing my neighbors and blessing my friends during this time of quarantine, and I came across this idea. So here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow, or not tomorrow, but on Friday night between 6 p.m. and 7 p.m., I'm going to be canvassing the neighborhood with my camera, and I'm going to be taking free family photos on your front porch. So you just let me know. I'll come to your address. You walk out on your porch. I'll stay out on the sidewalk. I'll do like a mini little photo session with your family, and I'll email you the pictures. And that's it. No strings attached. I'm just looking for a fun way to bless my neighbors." Man, I immediately got some responses before I even went to bed. It was like boom, boom, boom. People were liking the post. They were responding. I've got my messenger inbox is full of people, of my neighbors, who some of them I've never met, many of them. Actually, there's only one neighbor that I've ever met who has responded. They live 2 doors down from us. Everyone else that has responded, I've never met. And they're like, "Yeah, this is a great idea. We just had a baby, and we've not had any family photos taken yet with our brand new baby. This is going to be the first one." I'm like, "Oh, wow. This is incredible. I get to be the first one to take their family photos." And I just feel privileged and honored to get to do that. Some people are like, "Well, I don't have a family. I live alone, but I've got a dog. Can you come take a picture of me and my dog?" I'm like, "Absolutely, sure." So I just feel like this is a great way to build morale in my neighborhood and in my city. And you can feel the camaraderie as you're out in the neighborhood walking on the sidewalk and you're greeting people and you see them. And so that's, I think, a silver lining in this quarantine is that I feel like hopefully, at least in my neighborhood with my experience, people are becoming more friendly, even more so than they were a week or 2 ago. The more I see people out, the more hungry they are for just even the littlest relationship. So what about you? What about you? 3 things.
3 things. Well, we also play Catan. Love that game. And the board game that we've been playing at our house is Pictionary, which is hilarious because the version of Pictionary that we have is like 30 years old. I don't know how we have such an old one, but it's very old. And you'll get the kids are doing it, so they'll get words. What is this? And you have to try to explain to them, what a cassette player is, or something. They're like, I don't get it. They're like, I don't know how to draw a cassette player, and so that's pretty fun. If we can get through the game without too much fighting, we still, there's 6 of us here, 7 actually. We have a house guest, and in quarantine with us, and the age range, of course, is adult all the way down to 10, and sometimes that can be a little bit much, but it is still fun to get together and play games. So that's been fun. Frankly, my boys just go off and play video games as much as we let them. But one thing that we've been doing that Alice and I find fun, not fun, but the outcome is fun, is that we've been doing like massive amounts of spring cleaning slash finishing jobs. And I've heard that Home Depot and Lowe's are super busy.
I bet.
Even now, because everyone's at home, and there's no kid events at night, and there's no sporting events, unfortunately. We're able to get all kinds of stuff done. And so it's been almost every day we're doing something else around the house that needs to be done. Depends on how long this lasts. I might actually get through half of my jobs. The things I've got lined up. One of these days I'll finish them, I'm sure. And we have not watched Doolittle yet. You did tell me that it was terrible, and now it's like gone way to the back burner. On that.
You could do it if you watched every other good movie and you just know that ahead of time. Guys, we're going to go into this movie and we're going to just make fun of it. Just go for it.
That's terrible because the original Doolittle is actually pretty good.
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah, it's great.
And I never saw the Eddie Murphy one, but at a certain point, you don't need to make the same movie 3 times. And I guess they didn't. It's like an adventure movie this time or something.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
it's a little bit different. Yeah, it's different. It's not the same regurgitated story, but it's pretty awful.
Well, look, I mean, it's Iron Man talking to animals, so it's gonna be like that, I think. I know a lot of people love Robert
Downey Jr.
Robert Downey Jr. But really, I think most people just love Iron Man, and because he wasn't, no offense, but he wasn't a real big actor for a while prior to that. That was like his comeback movie, right?
Yeah.
And after that, I've seen him in a couple other films, and I'm like, Sherlock Holmes was basically Iron Man, right? And just in Victorian Iron Man. And again, the too smart for your own good kind of sarcastic guy. But what's another
like
thing
those guys?
I like those guys personally. Yeah, we like them. I have to live with myself too. And
so imagine yourself doing Doolittle.
Yeah, no, I don't want to. Yeah. I'd be annoyed as heck that the animals weren't listening to me. It would be like having a dozen more kids. I'd be, sit down, I told you. One cool thing, it's really cool that you're going out and taking pictures of people. That's really cool. One thing that I've done to get around the stuck kind of thing is one of our friends, my friend David and Victoria, we went to coffee with them and dinner. But we're not allowed to go with them. Right. So we went in our own cars. We followed behind them. We had our phone on speakerphone, so we're talking to each other the whole time. And then when we get there, we get our food to go. And I had camping chairs. And so we parked in the middle of the parking lot, empty parking lot. We set up our camping chair 10 feet away from each other. And we just ate our food and talked to each other.
That's great.
I know, it was fun. And I've been thinking about this camping chair thing for a while. Like, if you're staying far enough away from each other and no one has symptoms, aren't you okay? I mean, I know you can get it without symptoms, but 10 feet away, that's safe, right? I'm assuming that's safe if no one's coughing on you. I'm assuming. So we could do that.
According to Dan Scott, you're not supposed to sing toward each other or pray for each other.
Okay, so it takes a lot of pressure off a lot of people. Jamie can maybe try to really fight that urge to sing. But I think, I don't know if that's, we're in Tennessee, so we're not at the crackdown yet. We're in the social distancing phase still. So I felt like 10 feet away, eating our food was a good way to spend some time. No hugs or anything afterwards. Got in the car, took our own trash with us. So that was kind of fun.
That's great.
We'll do that again with
other
people or something. But been adapting. I guess the whole point has been adapting,
Sure.
And trying to make it work. But there's been fun stuff. I know it's been hard for a lot of us they like to go and talk to people and get in business and hang out with each other. But there's been some good stuff. There's some silver lining that we can try to take from it, make the best
Absolutely.
of it,
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's not a storm. It just means there's a silver lining with the storm.
Yeah.
All my kids keep coming in.
Well, that's okay. You and I, we've been on here for doing this for an hour now.
A whole hour.
Bless anybody that has stayed and listened to this entire episode. So we haven't decided much about this. We decided about this podcast that we wanted to get it up and going. We haven't decided on the frequency, how often,
Right.
and the limitations of how long it's going to be per episode. We just decided, hey, let's get out of the huddle. Let's call a play. Let's snap the ball. Let's go. As you can see there, I like sports analogies sometimes. So thank you for
All we
listening
have.
to.
That's all we have. We don't.
That's all we have.
That's all we have is analogies.
Is there anything else that you want to say before we get off of here?
No, I mean, I appreciate it. We're just two dudes having a conversation. We can talk about whatever we want.
And as you can see, we like to hear ourselves talk a lot because we've been talking for an hour nonstop.
I mean, if we weren't making a podcast, we'd be talking a lot longer than an hour. So,
well, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, we have all these conversations, and I'm going, there might be some other people that want to hear what we have to say, at least to make fun of us.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm looking forward to. I haven't been bullied for a few years, so yeah, I'm looking forward to reliving my high school years again.
You can get back in that game. Yeah,
I can get back. Yeah.
Well, everybody, thanks for listening to Everyone Else Has a Podcast. And we hope to see you next time. Be sure to subscribe and like. And if you have hateful comments to leave, you can just keep those to yourself.
Please.
You can mail them if you want to. You can write them on mail. All right. So everybody, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. And maybe you'll eventually decide to have a podcast of your own.